So what we're going to focus on today is about using AI and using AI for a, a complex task. And what we've seen in our research with people using AI is most people use it wrong. They treat AI as an oracle and they expect it to give us the right answers. And oftentimes it doesn't give the right answers. In contrast, we see companies that encourage and train people to work with AI to treat as a partner actually get much better results. So, what we're going to talk about today is how you get that partnership going and how do you get things working back and forth. As a starting point, if we're going to talk about business model innovation, we'd have to define what business model innovation is about. And business model innovation is about changing the way a company creates, delivers, and captures value to better meet customer needs, stay competitive, and improve profitability. It's not necessarily about making new products, but rethinking about how your business works. Now, I don't know how many of you here are actually involved in business model innovation, but it's for me, it's probably the most important type of innovation because what you look at, it's a much more holistic view of your business. I'm old enough to remember, maybe Bryant is as well, the days of Michael Porter, where he talked about value, experience curves, and all that kind of stuff. And that worked for a while, and then it didn't. And there was a focus then on innovation and say, look, what we're going to have is the most creative things in the world. And that's going to make our business successful, but then it didn't. And what you see now is a bunch of companies which are focusing on how you innovate across your business. Instead of just focusing on how you do things and what you offer, it's about who you serve and how you pull value out of it. And the most important reason why you might want to look at business model innovation is it's a lot harder to copy. It's easy to copy a product. It's easy to copy experience. It's hard to copy all the ways that you're doing business. Now, there's a guy I like a lot. His name's Gary Hamel. He talks about in the future, the competition will not take place between products or companies, but between business models. Now, if I talk about business model innovation, what comes to mind? I mean, just your first thing that comes out. Is there a book? Is there a methodology? Is there something you look at? My guess is almost everybody thinks about it in terms of the business model canvas. And the business model canvas is a pretty powerful tool. It has 9 blocks for all the different parts of your business. It lets you sketch, test, and pivot business models fast. But if you actually use this over an extended period of time, it gets really, really hard and really complicated. What I found is a better alternative, and I don't know if any of you have seen it, is something from St. Gallen's. St. Gallen's has a simpler business model which focuses on the key things that a company is doing, um, i.e., what do you offer? How do you deliver? How do you capture value? And what they've done, which is really cool, is they've matched that to a bunch of business models for inspiration. Now, you could choose to use the business model canvas, or you could choose to use the St. Gallen's. Um, but in both of them, basically what you're looking at ways to do things different. And a good rule of thumb is innovation in business models is about creating two or more parts that are different to create a new business model. And personally, I find the St. Gallen's thing a lot easier, and that's the thing we're going to use today. Um, to give you an example to start, um, you could look at the taxi business and look at how business model innovation came up there. What was the traditional or the old business model? Well, what did they offer? Transportation. Who did they serve? They said people needing rides. How they did license cabs, typically with own fleets, and they had the value they captured was the drivers paying a fixed fee or uh, the fare less the driver, what you're paying the drivers. Now, an easy way to get inspired is to copy things that you find elsewhere. St. Gallen's has something called the 55 business models that can be used to describe 90% of businesses. The insight is these business models can be used to inspire other businesses or other ways to work. You might have looked, here are two business models that existed long before Uber. Both could have been, but probably weren't inspiration for other, but both suggest key ways that this business could be changed. One is if you look at a two-sided market, i.e., a matching market, where you have to bring people together. And secondly, where does Uber make its most money? It's by dynamic pricing. How do you set a higher price and a lower price at the right point in time? And what they do is they changed all these elements of the business to what they're doing is they have an auction model in terms of the way that they function. Instead of how they do it, instead of owning a fleet, they have people come with their own cars. And the way they get money is about dynamic pricing and revenue sharing. Now, before I go into the case that we're going to look at, let me give you a quick introduction. Who am I? My name is Bryan Cassady. I'm what you might call a serial entrepreneur, but a lot of people call themselves serial entrepreneurs. I've done 11 companies in 6 countries, had 8 exits along the way. A while ago, somebody asked me if I'd like to teach, and I said, well, shoot, who wants to teach? And it turned out that actually I like teaching. And I've taught at Stanford, Berkeley, University of Chicago, and in Europe at Heck, Solvay, KU Leuven. And then I took a detour, went to Angola for a while, and set up a foundation to train 1 million innovators. Now, what I found is the only way that I'm going to reach that is by using AI. So I've gone in all in on AI. I'm also joined, not today, but the two co-authors of the book of the chapter we're looking at today, Gian Fabio Inglesi and Charles-Antoine Poirier, both French, both interested in business model innovation. And together, we put together a book which we're going to use to describe, how you might do business model innovation. So what I have is the first book that I put out was called Cycles. In my humble opinion, a great book. Um, it helped companies innovate faster, better, quicker, easier. It won a few awards. But then there's this horrible thing that happened just after I introduced it, is ChatGPT came out. And when you look at the index of my book, AI isn't even in the index of the book. What people started doing is say, well, Bryan, this is all really cool stuff, but how could you use AI to do these things? And so we went back to the drawing board and started with the next book, which is called The Generative Organization. It'll be done either later this month or in July. And it's about how to do all the stuff in the first book with AI. And the simple message is AI can be fantastic, but bad AI wastes a lot of time. And if you want to use things effectively, you need domain expertise. You need to know where you're working. You need to know method expertise, like in this case, business model innovation, AI expertise, and human beings in the loop. All the chapters are basically the same format. There's a bit of theory, a bit of keys to success, and how to do it with AI. And you'll see these things coming out in the chapters here, which is basically how do you do this, how do you review it and share it. So, first question for you guys. Has anybody tried using AI to do business model innovation? Is it something that you say, oh, that's fantastic, it's a good idea? Have you failed? Has it been successful? Has it been a good thing? Any experiences so far?
Not in a practical way, but just experimenting and saying like, asking ChatGPT based on what you know about me, what kind of things would you recommend for me in the future? And it kind of recommended a current career path and then going into consulting and what that business model would look like.
And overall, was the advice good or was it a little bit off base?
It was pretty good. It was a very interesting mirror to have put up, and then answered a couple of questions going back, but it got me kind of excited.
So I personally find it I'm getting a bit dependent on AI. And I really wonder. I see these studies coming up where people's brains are thinking different on AI, and I'm wondering if I'm losing some of my mental synapse. But I find AI becomes such a natural thing to do because you're able to ask questions quite quickly and sort of inform your thinking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a really fast case study. I don't know if anybody has ever heard of a company called Django. Django does music streaming. It's my favorite music streaming service, by the way. Um, and the challenge I'd like to put together is could we find a new business model that lets this little tiny, tiny company that I like compete with this massive behemoth, which is called Spotify, quickly and easy. And what I think would be interesting is looking at how you could do that. One way you could do it is you could use ChatGPT, talk to it. They know most of what you need to know. You could use an LLM adding knowledge files, a couple books, a couple articles. Nothing. Um, the other thing you could do is you could use the resources we have, and of course, I'm going to recommend that. But and what they are is a series of expert prompts or a GPT, which you can actually have a conversation with. Um, and what's interesting is they all come together in a package of information. And actually, what you've got is you have each of them. We have long prompts that allow you to do the stuff that you want, or they're all bundled up here. But let's focus on how we can do this here. So there's going to be 6 steps. One, access tools. Two, start with a question or a challenge. Then look at how you answer those questions, get results, interact, make some decisions, and keep a human in the loop. And the question I'd have is, could you do this in 15 minutes? And what would be fun? I mean, we could do this for another business in the time that's available, but the chances of hitting it spot on target are pretty low. So let me tell you what we've gone through. And at the end, by the way, you'll have an access to all the slides here. So this is a fictitious case. I would actually like to go talk to Django afterwards because I like them and I think they could use some help. We started out by using an AI to get some information about the business we're in. So we got a meeting coming up with Django. They run a small online music streaming business. We'd like to see how they might create a new and improved business model to take business from Spotify. Let's start by looking at the business models of both. And lo and behold, what AI is able to do is it's able to fill this in and tell you all the stuff there. Now, what you might want to look at is the difference in size. So the market capitalization is 50 billion versus 50 million. So we're talking about completely different animals, um, and different ways of how they could do things in the marketplace. This is minute number one. Minute number two, let's look at ways Django could create a more competitive business model. Let's start by looking at issues in the Spotify business model and business trends that might provide opportunities. And what I'd like you to do is get inspired by the St. Gallen's business model templates to make a new Django business model. One of the ideas I suggested provide this one. So in terms of what we're looking at is we can look at the key elements of the business, what they do, how they deliver, how they capture value, and looking at ways that you can improve those different things. And essentially, what we're looking at is an amazing amount of choice, but it drowns the user. It's expensive. It's not very local. And basically, the model that they're running is sort of running out of steam. Um, and we could look at some of the trends that we see happening in the marketplace. Um, Okay, trend number one, rise of the creator economy. Maybe we can make funny music available, AI personalization, ethical streaming, all these types of things. But what's interesting here is you start looking at a business and you start looking for holes and challenges. And a question you might ask is if you did this with your business, what types of things would they find as holes? And would it be interesting for you to go through with that kind of a conversation? So now we're up 3 minutes out. Um, so now let's look at ways Django could create a new business model. Let's start by looking at the issues in Spotify and business trends that might be opportunity. And what I find interesting here is it's just talking back and forth, talking back and forth. This was done in one set of conversation. What they identified was a series of different business models, which might be different and interesting. The first one was the fan to artist loop. Um, it's instead of having the listeners pay for a service, they let them fund the artists, which is quite in line with the social idea behind Django. Um, we can look at indie artists, Gen Z fans looking for direct engagement, going back and forth. All right, that's a good, cool. We might look at mindful soundscapes. So, in fact, moving away from traditional music to a specific part of the business. And each time what we come out with is we come out with differences who, what, how, and why. We could look at local pulse. Um, so a geo-aware music discovery service where actually it could be the neighborhood radio of the future, which is very different than Spotify, which is the global radio of today. And Model 4, which is a next-gen music platform where AI meets humans to co-create songs, artists, prototype, and work with AI to create new stuff. So all of this stuff is basically just giving you feedback on where you might go. A question for you, Justin. If you did this stuff for yourself, do you think it would give you useful content? Or do you think you'd have to give it a lot more feedback?
I think it'd be useful as a starting point, but I'd look to validate. And one of the things, like looking at these, even for the models, I'd probably use a tool or myself go into like a Reddit or uh, like place where people complain so I could see what the complaints are for Spotify.
Yeah. So the idea is you identify the pain points which are there instead of relying on AI to pull this information back. I think that's pretty smart. Bryant, what do you think?
Well, I've actually used AI successfully to change how I run my business. My original thinking was in one direction, and it completely changed the direction and focus of what I do. And as a result of that, I don't use these these business models as per se. So I engage a lot with my LLMs. And as a result of that, it has now insight more about me as a result. But the questions that I generally ask it always is when it shows me something like this, I look for the ability to ask it, where are the gaps in it? So using your Spotify example, I would have asked, what are the gaps in services that Spotify do? And that would be probably one of the easiest ways to identify where there are a potential business model for the other company.
So it looks like both of you are using it in a smart way. So in fact, it's not the oracle, it's not giving you the answers, but you're using it as inspiration to find the right place to go. And so you guys are your Uber users, if you want to go back to the beginning, because most people just say, look, oh, AI told me this, we're going to go and do this. And that's just completely wrong. I mean, for me, the trick and what I hear both you saying is about the need to think and the need to interact. And once if you just take what it gives you, it's not going to give you fantastic results. Um, so what I liked personally model number 4, which is about a co-creation model. And we might go back and forth and continue our dialogue, going back and forth and say, look at we like model number 4, look at the current business and the new business model, recommend the two easiest changes we could make that would take substantial business from Spotify and give me the reasons for that. Um, and what they looked at is launch a freemium AI remix service for listeners, i.e., keep things interactive, and putting a studio beta for indie artists with some minimum viable tools. Now, what's interesting here is not whether these are great ideas or bad ideas, but the fact that we get ideas to build on. And what we did 12 minutes out, give me an estimate of what these things would cost. We're not looking at something that's horribly expensive in terms of putting it together. For option number 1, we're looking at 100 to 150,000 with a potential revenue of maybe 500,000 per year. And for the second one, we're looking at an investment of 150,000 and maybe 750,000 coming back. And now we're saying, okay, yeah, I can imagine this. And the question you might ask is, what are the biggest risks with a new Django? And put this together into a risk mitigation chart. And there again, what we're trying to do is we're looking at not just taking what AI gives us, but giving us feedback on how we go. So we have legal risk, we have brand risk, we have tech risk, we have revenue risk, ethical risk. And what we're looking at is we come up with a total thing. We say, okay, we might say, look, we're going to do these two things, an AI remix, an AI studio, total investment maybe 300,000, uplift maybe 1 million, increase in market value 4 to 10 million. Not bad for 15 minutes together, assuming that both of them work. Now, the last thing you'd want to do is go backwards and say, are these ideas any good? One of the things that we have within the chapter we have is actually a tool which actually makes a workshop to discuss everything that you want to talk about. So what we do is we say, look, we got this idea. We're going to build a new business model. We're going to work with AI for co-creation. What we want to do is come back and look at this step by step and validate the things that we're doing. So it's not just AI giving us. So the advantage of the AI in the process here is one is it accelerates things. It knows things that we don't know. It reduced some of the risk by giving us feedback on what works and what doesn't. It can probably give us consumer feedback and probably some systematic opportunity. But then the question you have is, can you trust it? And the answer is only sort of. And I think the challenge there is basically to keep your brain on and go from AI being the answer to AI being a muse in the process. And I can suggest 4 ways to do this. One is start with the talk. 2 would be turn the table. 3, add domain expertise. And let me go through these one by one. So starting with a talk. I don't know about you, but I don't think very well with my fingers. I've trained that to a certain extent, but I still think better when I talk. And maybe a good way to get this going would be to just talk for a while about Django. What's cool, what's not cool, key points, basically stream of consciousness for a bit. You could have a long and even really long talk and give that as a feedback to start the process. A second thing you can do is before you do this, we actually were pretty directive and say, give me this, give me this. But something you can do, which is really powerful, is we've been looking at these ideas for Django. But before you start, give me a couple questions to clarify my challenge and clarify the direction you're going to. A third thing you could do is add domain expertise, because in fact, one of the things that's here is we're sort of blind. At least I'm blind as a person writing the case. One of the things you could do is ask AI to help you collect a whole bunch of information about the market. And I don't know how many of you do it, but the deep search from ChatGPT and Gemini and Grok and things like that is truly amazing. And you could say, look, write me a prompt to collect all the information I would need to make sure that that's the whole prompt. And then the last thing is to be a bit humble. Um, so in fact, we've gone through and we've done all this. And one of the things you might do is identify some key things that we missed in our analysis and suggest an action plan to solve these things. Now, if I look at this whole process, um, there's nothing here which is horribly complex. Um, it's a question of sort of following the tracks, going through things step by step. What I do find is a lot of times we don't do what we're supposed to do. What we bring is some expertise to define your challenges, some tools. Some people have said we're actually fun to work with. Um, and what we do is we put together workshops like this. So what we did in 15 minutes, we do over 2 hours a day or longer. We do keynotes on lots of different things. My core expertise is not business model innovation, but innovation in general. If you want, you could sign up and get a free talk, and we go forward from there. Um, and the question I have for you guys, does this help at all? Or is it just, okay, I came, I saw this. How would you actually put this in action? And I have a final prompt, which is going to be the last slide of my talk today, which is something you could use and do something amazing with. Um, Jens, what did you think? Justin, I only see you guys. I see three people with their cameras on, so I talk to you guys. I don't see the other people.
Well, actually, I have a question for you, Brian. So, what I found very interesting was a statement. It's you said basically it's easier to think by words or when talking than with the fingers. So, have you any experience what the difference is to use the voice input for like ChatGPT compared to the standard keyboard input?
So I wish I could say I had real studies. I can just tell you for myself, what I find it's amazing. I go to a client meeting, I get back to my car. So instead of listening to the radio, I will talk for 30 minutes and I will ask AI to organize my thoughts. And it does it much better than I could ever do it. So I'm in a market of one. I know that talking is an amazing tool. The question that comes up is, is there proof for it? And I really should go out and look for it because I'm sure that someplace you can find something showing that when people talk, they're able to do things more effectively. The only place I've really seen it is in actually writing and in pitch making. In both those areas, when you talk in what you're saying, the writing is clearer and the presentations are clearer. So what I've got is I'm going to give you a link, um, which I'm going to ask you if you give me some feedback, tell me what you think, what you liked, what you didn't like, so on and so forth. If you have time, great. If you don't have time, I'm not going to learn. But I am going to suggest you try one thing. I'm going to give you a secret prompt to go off into the world. And this secret prompt will allow you to do a lot of the things we're talking about in an effective way. If you do a screenshot of the QR code, it'll start automatically on your phone. If you take the link and you throw it in, it will start automatically a ChatGPT chat, assuming that you have ChatGPT on your computer or an account. And it says, you're a business model innovation expert. I'd like your help investigating new business models for our company. Ask me questions about my company one at a time until you can clearly define each of it should be the four building blocks of the St. Gallen's business model navigator. Who, what, how, value for my company. Then for each of the 40 St. Gallen's business models, identify disruptive innovation opportunities to change our business. Review the potential of these ideas and give me 3 to review further. If you do this and you have a little chat, I know that we're done earlier than planned, give it a shot. And I think you might be amazed at what comes up.